What up, Comics World? This is Splendopia. I'm Rob Casey, and I'm going to get into this next batch of G.I. Joe trades. Classic G.I. Joe. This one is released by IDW. This is a J. Scott Campbell cover, which I'm not too crazy about these, although I have to admit, it looks great. It's just not my type. Volume 2 is a Larry Hama. There we go. There's my boy, Dr. Venom. Larry Hama written mostly. There's one filler in the back, and on the first 10 issues, I was like, isn't there another issue in here? And it's always that 20th issue that's the filler. I always think is in the first 10 because it just kind of like it breaks up the story. It's a classic filler issue where you can see that like the crew needed a break and they needed to fill in after like this huge long arc came to a conclusion. This also represents the next year's release of G.I. Joe. This is when G.I. Joe like really started to blow up. So the first batch of G.I. Joe action figures, which the comic was made for to promote, came out in 1982, and those were the straight arm figures that were kind of based off the Buck Rogers design. In 1983, they expanded their offerings. What's called the original 13, and then Cobra Commander, the Cobra Soldier, and Cobra Officer reused parts. In this new year's line, they had like much more dynamic part sculpting, different specialties for the characters, different branches of the military represented. Larry wrote all the file cards for all the characters. He based some of the names of the characters off men that he had been in the military with in Vietnam. I understand. You're not really supposed to do that. So I think there were some problems down the line, or maybe they changed names slightly. But that is the lore that I've heard. And all these characters have like really diverse backgrounds. This year introduces like Airborne, the Native American, and Torpedo, who is he's like a Native Hawaiian, and Doc, who is like the highest ranked member of the G.I. Joe team, other than Colonel Hawk. So issue number 11 introduces these characters for the first time in The Pipeline Ploy, another issue that takes place in Alaska, my home state. So I used to love this. I used to love this stuff. These issues were really fun to me, all the ones that were set in the Arctic or in Alaska especially. And in this one, you basically have the new team of Joes coming to provide a breather for the crew that's been fighting Cobra, the original 13, who have been injured. There's some jokes. Gung Ho, the Marine, his action figure came without a shirt, so there's a little back and forth about how he's putting on a front to show how tough he is, crawling around in the snow, bare shirted. But they would do that a lot in G.I. Joe. They would make sure to have the characters in the comic book represent their toy appearance, even if it didn't make a lot of sense. I think it was, it's a mixed bag. We make fun of it, but it's also fun for the kids to have representations of their toys that look like their toys. So here we introduce Cobra Commander's new number 2, and a character who becomes one of the most beloved throughout the G.I. Joe franchise. And we don't ever see his beryllium-covered helmeted head in this first issue. We just kind of get a sense that he has a backstory with the Baroness, and he's going to go be the new field commander for Cobra Commander. And we're only going to see him in this first issue in Shadows. And that's basically the nature of it. This kind of introduces all the new characters. There's some creative problem solving that Doc employs, taking on, again, this character who's only portrayed in the Shadows, with the grenades on his arms and the wrist rocket launchers on his other arms. If you know anything about G.I. Joe, you clearly know who I'm talking about. But that's the kind of fun mystery that I think comic books, when they have the new villain in Shadows, and you don't really get the full picture of who they are, and it just makes them only more mysterious and more interesting and you know, you get more excited about following them. So Paramount Pictures has re-upped with Hasbro, according to reporting on His Tank, which is a G.I. Joe fan site. They're gonna renew their deal to continue making G.I. Joe content. That was part of a filing that they released. And the other thing that has come out is the new G.I. Joe film, Snake Eyes, which I talked about in one of the other videos, has been moved. I saw it since I made the other video, has been moved into production. Take that for what it's worth. What does that mean? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not. I am not as close to what's going on inside Paramount and Hasbro as probably many of you are. So we'll see what happens. But this next arc, this huge arc throughout, it starts with issue number 12, but it kind of runs through 22 with a couple of disruptions. Memorable disruptions. One being like one of the greatest single issue comic books of all time, issue number 21. But this story, Three Strikes for Snake Eyes, kicks off this really fun series of events and subplots that really define most of these characters from the 1982 and 1983 line of G.I. Joe, as well as introducing and playing with a couple of really amazing characters. One of my favorites, Dr. Venom, and Quinn, who we talked about in another video, and also Scarface is another kind of shady Cobra soldier that gets used and abused by the Cobra hierarchy throughout this plot. But taking a lot of events from these next 10 issues, that would be a great way to go with a Snake Eyes movie. There's a lot of like road trippy type stuff. There's a lot of things that are like not the sort of stuff that you would expect from G.I. Joe. So let's kind of get into it, and I'm going to kind of blow through it pretty quick. But here we go. This all kicks off in San Francisco. They find some video game parts that are being manufactured in South America by the, I guess, Naha's snake in Spanish. Is that right? Trading Corp. In Sierra Gorda, which is another fictional country that is portrayed in a lot of the Larry Hama issues. And there is Dr. Venom. Dr. Venom is the guy who's running this. He quickly identifies the G.I. Joe team, and we find that Quinn the mercenary that we haven't seen since issue number 2 is working for Cobra down south of the border. So they tie up the G.I. Joe gang, and Dr. Venom often has the upper hand. Part of the thing that would make, I think, this such a good film is, you struggle with G.I. Joe movies, with Snake Eyes and with Cobra Commander and with Destro. They're all like masked characters, who, in Snake Eyes' case, who doesn't speak at all. You can see why it might be hard. It has historically also been hard to get actors to do that, to have their face totally covered, to just be a voice, or to be completely covered like Ray Park was as Snake Eyes. Dr. Venom is like one of those classic villains of G.I. Joe, where you could definitely imagine like a big name actor wanting to take that part on, as well as Quinn. Quinn is also like a classic character that a lot of G.I. Joe fans would love to see. It's a little bit like not what a lot of people would expect out of a G.I. Joe movie, but anybody who was a fan in the 80s who read the comic book would really appreciate it. So there you go. You see the Joes make their escape, and the Baroness comes in the next issue. She's going to take them out. Here you have my favorite character, Stalker, wrestling a crocodile. Another great scene. There's just all kinds of. Here's the south of the border Laurel and Hardy reference that Larry threw in. Just a lot of kinds of, in a classic Cobra Temple, a lot of just classic imagery, a lot of reversals, a lot of action. This was like Larry at his best, and whatever you have to pay him for adapting his material, you don't necessarily need him. It's pretty much all here, but I would I would definitely consider this storyline, among others, in the line of Marvel. But this one is a favorite. Just gonna skip ahead to what you get is Dr. Venom, Quinn, and Snake Eyes have all been trapped in the sunken bunker after the explosion, after the attack. And so now, and for the next many issues, you have this like amazing triangle of characters: Dr. Venom, Quinn, and Snake Eyes, just each trying to one up each other, each trying to like get the upper hand on each other, and maneuver the escape in their favor. And then, you know, you have a classic cover over here, Destro. A lot of these covers, you can see these covers were made into commercials, G.I. Joe commercials. And those are really cool to check out on YouTube. You absolutely should do that if you get a chance. Look at that great shot of Quinn. So those guys all spend the next few issues like working together, double crossing each other. While Cobra Commander and Destro have another plot going on. They're going to use Dr. Venom's toxin to discover the location of G.I. Joe headquarters and attack. And so that's what's going on. That's basically the storyline that's going on through this whole issue. In this portion of it, the Joes get really close to Cobra's Springfield base, but Destro like wards off the attack, and they're sort of diverted by that. And they kind of forget about Springfield for a long time until I think like issue number 50. They finally get it together to figure out that Cobra's headquartered there, and they stage the invasion of Springfield. So here's another great cover. This like says it all in terms of the relationship between the three men in these like next issues. Here's Venom like pleading for his life to some mercenaries, trying to double cross those guys again. They eventually are stuck getting into a plane together. And then wind up in jail. This is Florida. Yep, Miami. So next issue, the Night Attack. This is another one where it was like I can remember the commercial for Night Attack because they hadn't had the Arthur Burkhart like Destro voice, where he's like the deep sort of commando. It was like they had this like kind of weird sort of we'll stage a night attack as Destro. So that always like when I see that title, it always makes me laugh because I think of that commercial with that kind of weirdo Destro voice before it was cemented. Here we go. We've got all these like Cobras back together. Dr. Venom has negotiated his release from prison before the others. And Hawk and Destro, Hawk and Cobra Commander kind of square off on the back of the tank. That's that first image from the book. There's also a great moment, this crash where Major Blood leaves the Baroness behind to her apparent death. So that's a great Major Blood moment. Major Blood is another great character. The mercenary, he was a mail-away figure as well, I think, that was released in 1983. And there he is. He's like escaped to a city bus, and Grand Slam is tracking him down. That's kind of what's going on in this issue. And it's just a continuation. It's just great action. There's Ace, the jet pilot. You know, he's doing an attack. You know, that's a really fun panel. This is a great trade, guys. If you are interested in G.I. Joe and you haven't read this, you should. Meanwhile, Scarface, who we talked about, he's been infected, and he's trying to make the escape. He has the neurotoxin, so he's kind of like a hot potato that everybody's trying to get their hands on. We can kind of jump ahead. All this stuff is sort of culminating in there they've captured him. Them trying to find the location of the G.I. Joe headquarters. And what you get is you get everybody tracking Scarface down to his hideout in Coney Island, including Quinn and Snake Eyes, who have finally caught up with the rest of the G.I. Joe team. And they, once again, will find themselves at the mercy of Dr. Venom. While the G.I. Joe guys like fight Destro. And this continues. They've got Scarface in the pit. And here's the seeming or the apparent, the close to resolution of Dr. Venom with Quinn and Snake Eyes. Major Blood is captured and taken down to the pit treacherously. As these guys have Cobra bearing in on them, Snake Eyes gets tricked into getting into the snake armor. Dr. Venom says he's going to power it up, but he actually activates the mind control based on the brainwave scanner from issue number 10, turning the tables on Quinn, and he puts both those guys in the snake armor and makes them his minions in the final battle versus G.I. Joe. Here we go. It's Quinn and Snake Eyes. Dr. Venom, who wouldn't want to play this? This guy gleefully forcing his enemies to do his bidding. Finally, Quinn breaks out and has had enough of Dr. Venom. This story is getting very close to its end. Yeah, look at that. Who doesn't want to see that in a movie? Meanwhile, Major Blood gets the better of the Joes in the pit and the better of General Flag. While Venom shoots Quinn and he drops the grenade. And so that's the end of this issue. Then the Joes. It's one of the cool kind of tone things that Larry does over and over again, where he pairs a victory with tragedy. And there's Hawk celebrating, but he's delivered the dog tags of General Flag, who's dead, and Quinn with a weasel skull necklace from Snake Eyes. So that's great. That's pretty much it. This is a filler issue that's not written by Larry. It's fine in all regards. It's a good issue. It just is sort of like, it's kind of out of continuity, but it's executed reasonably well. This is a creative team on it, and basically like Clutch gets a furlough to his hometown. Turns out Cobra is running a base there, building like rocket packs. So you get like a bunch of rocket pack action from Clutch. He brings the Joe team back, and they help rescue his friend. So that's it. There we go. That's the second trade. That's issues 11 through 20. This is some of Larry's best work. Buy it. If you work for Paramount or Hasbro, think about adapting it into the new Snake Eyes film. If you're in production, you probably don't need this suggestion. But if you're looking for ideas for scenes, you could do worse. The next trade starts with issue number 21, the famous silent issue, which some people consider to be one of the top single issue comic books of all time. So I look forward to reviewing that, and thank you for joining me today.